Welcome to the Traveling Professors. I'm Professor Bob.
And I'm Professor Sheri.
And together we are the Traveling Professors. Welcome to show number 83. Sheri and I are going to take you on a tour of the Vatican Museum. Now this is an incredibly daunting task. The museum has 9 miles of displays. There are 70,000 works of art, of which 20,000 of them are on display. And it is the 4th most popular museum to visit in the world. Most tours, if you take a tour guide, are going to take 3 hours. Sheri and I were here from 8 o'clock in the morning until 3 o'clock to 3:30 in the afternoon. There really wasn't a good way to break this into different segments. So put on some good walking shoes and let's start walking. And we've looked at these Roman maps enough, you should have these memorized. Well, it's a little longer to get to the Vatican. So we get on our usual metro there by the Colosseum. We go up the train station, change to another train, which will then eventually take us across the Tiber. As you see here in this other part of it, there is where we will get out and walk. Now I told you before, they were building a new metro, and there is a new metro station not too far from Castle de San Angelo down here. So you could actually stay where we were located and have 2 choices on how to get there. Now we left early because we had a breakfast engagement, and I'll talk about that in just a minute. Here's some other ways that you can get around. Here's a map showing different entrances from Castle de San Angelo, but we're going to be using the number 1 entrance up here, because this whole section right in here is the museum. Now an aerial view, Vatican City, shows it a little better. You see St. Peter's, you see the main square out here, and then you see the yellow building, which is the various buildings that are now part of what is known as the Vatican Museum, with the Sistine Chapel being right here at the end. A nice aerial view of the Vatican City central area. So there's, of course, St. Peter's, massive St. Peter's Square. Now this building here is the Pope's residence, and then back behind it is the Vatican Museum. And then an aerial view of just the Vatican Museum itself. As you can see here, 676 employees work here. So this whole building, multiple levels, different sections. I mean, we didn't see all of it. We were there, as you could, 7 to 7.5 hours. We missed one of the main areas where they have the portraits. We could have been there all day. And the reason we weren't there all day is because we believe that by 3 o'clock in the afternoon, the crowds will be diminished so that we could easily go in the St. Peter's Basilica. We'll see how that turns out a little later. So here we are leaving the metro station, and we walk straight down this road. It's about 2 blocks. And then you come out and you see fortifications, the Renaissance fortifications, and of course there is the museum back there. And looking straight ahead, you would go into the area where the central St. Peter's is located, and that's where you would get in line to go and see the St. Peter's Basilica. So we turn on the street and we walk down the walls, and then here is the entrance. Now you notice there's nobody here. The Vatican has all sorts of different ways of visiting this place. So you really need to go to the Vatican Museum and look at their sites. And they're reasonably priced. And what they had that we are doing is they had an American-style breakfast at 8 o'clock in the morning. So we would come to this gate here, which is a special gate. The main gate is over here. So this is what it looks like when you go to visit the museum with the main gate, and then the line extends for hours at the back. And then the guard escorted us up to where everybody was, and here's the little breakfast buffet area. An excellent breakfast, I might add. It's in kind of the main green courtyard. So here we are standing in line to get our breakfast, and then this is what it looks like for the 2 of us. And Sheri, of course, has her coffee, and you can see this central section here, which has a variety of different artifacts in and around it. And if you needed to use the bathroom, they escorted you into the museum area, and the wall opened up, and there was the bathroom. What this also did is the museum usually didn't open until 10. We got to run around the museum an hour before they let everybody else in, which was great because there were times where we were in and looking at displays, and the people who were on the tours were down a level looking up at us because they didn't have access to this particular region. So here's a view. We walked around the courtyard area. There's the St. Peter's Dome, and then there's a view out to the St. Peter's Garden, and there's a little closer picture of St. Peter's Dome. Well, here's a chart showing where all the various rooms are in the Vatican. 3rd floor, 2nd floor, 1st floor, and then there's a ground floor. So we are in this area right in here. That's where we're having breakfast. And then we will go into these rooms along in here, wandering around through here, and then we'll ultimately head downstairs where we'll be seeing the Etruscan Museum. And then we'll ultimately, after the Etruscan Museum, we'll then join the line of people that are heading to all of these various rooms, working our way to, of course, the Sistine Chapel. Very easy to get turned around in here. It's not a problem, obviously, going down the long hallways, but boy, these long hallways are just stuffed with artifacts. The first place we're going to end up, here they are pulling the opening so that we can head up this area of statues and masks. And we're going to be going to what is known as the Greek Cross Gallery. In the Greek Cross Gallery, they have, as you can see on either side here, they have two magnificent porphyry sarcophagi. Their sarcophagus is made out of this purple marble. Stunning stuff. One of them is, the one on the right, is for St. Helena, that's Constantine's mother, and the other one is for Constance, the daughter of Constantine. So here we have a little view of the one with Constance, and then some of the workmanship on the side. And then here we have the one for St. Helena. Now, St. Helena's has drawn some interest in that a lot of people think this was originally intended for Constantine the Great because of the cavalry and the military motif. But we've been to Istanbul, and if you go into the first court of the Topkapi Palace, which is where you visit one of the oldest churches in Christendom, inside and back behind it where you can't get to, they have a courtyard where they have another one of these. And they believe that is the one that was specifically for Constantine. And then here's a view of the back side of it. Now, the Vatican Museum is made up of different museums that were founded by different people. So the room that we were just in is part of the Museum of Pio Clementino, and it takes its name from Pope Clement XIV, who established the museum, and Pius VI, who brought it to completion. Clement XIV came up with the idea of creating a new museum in Innocent VIII's Belvedere Palace, and he's the one who started the refurbishment work. That museum will have the octagonal court, the rotunda, where we were just been, is the Greek Cross Gallery, the Gallery of the Statues, the Gallery of the Busts, the Gallery of the Masks, the Salon of the Muse, and the Salon of the Animals. But we skipped around a little bit and end up in another museum, the Museum of Gregorio Ezinano. This houses the artifacts of ancient Egypt and some of Mesopotamia. And it was started in 1839 on the anniversary of Gregory XVI's ascension to the papacy. And the museum was created because the Pope believed that understanding ancient Egyptian civilization was vital in terms of its scientific importance, as well as its value in understanding the Old Testament. Each pope has his own little hobby. And so here we are entering the Museum of the Egyptians. Have this magnificent double column. There's a broken column, one of the masks in the back. And then we see a whole group of Shadabi statues. These are statues that you bring to life in the afterlife to work for you. And then we have a hall with these black marble statues of gods and leaders. And then here's one of the Mesopotamian scrolls, and then here's a couple of other tablets. And then when you leave the Museum of the Egyptians, you come out and you're going to head into the octagonal area. Now we are entering one of my favorite places in the museum, and that's the octagonal court, sometimes called the Belvedere Court. This is an octagonal series of niches with various statues. So here I'm going to stand in the middle and shoot and then take a close-up of a few of these. Here is the one niche, which has the Apollo Belvedere. And then here is the close-up. And then here we have one of the reclining gods, and that's a closer view. And then we come to the piece de resistance. This is the lacoon. Now, the lacoon is important because the lacoon is the first piece of art in the museum. It was discovered on July the 14th, 1506, in a vineyard near the Basilica of Santa Maria Maggiore in Rome. And Pope Julius II sent Giuliano de Segallo and Michelangelo, who were working at the Vatican, to check it out. On their recommendation, the Pope immediately purchased the sculpture, and the Pope put the sculpture, which represents the Trojan priest Lacoon and his two sons being attacked by a giant serpent after he told the people not to take the horse in, put it on public display at the Vatican exactly 1 month after its discovery. So it is the official opening of the Vatican Museum that you see. It is one of the iconic statues. And then here is the entrance that we came in. And then here we have one statue on loan. And then we move around, and we have this column, part of a column in this base, which is quite interesting. And then we have a female statue. And then we have Perseus and the boxers. Now, Perseus is not ancient. This statue was done by Antonio Canova in the 1700s, but it's obviously stunning. The two others, the two boxers on either side of it, are of course from ancient times. So this is some spectacular work of art that you see here. And then we leave the octagonal rotunda and we move to the gallery of statues, which you see here. And then there's the gallery of animals. And then we end up at the gallery of the muses. And you have all of these various muse statues. This is from one side to the other. Beautiful ceiling in the muse room. And then here's two close-ups of two of the muses. Now our next stop is the Rotunda room, a miniature of the Pantheon. The room has incredible ancient mosaics on the floor and ancient statues lining the perimeter, including a bronze statue of Hercules. Here's the entrance. We're entering into the room. So you can see this piece of furniture in the middle of the room, which is where all these mosaics are gathered around. This is looking up into the ceiling, and which of course if you've been to the Pantheon, it looks just exactly like the Pantheon. And then all around the base you have these gladiatorial contests, you have animals, you have all sorts of things being depicted. And then we have all of these statues, some of them of emperors, some of them of various gods. Here is a very nice statue of the Emperor Claudius. I don't think Claudius ever looked so good. And then here in this picture you can see the gilt bronze. And then here's another one of the emperors, again looking at around the room. And then here's a close-up of the bronze statue of Hercules. And to give you some scale, there I am, 6'2½", standing in front of this piece of bronze, and I barely make it over the top of the pedestal that it's sitting on. So after making a circle, it's time to head back out, and we're going to be going upstairs to see the Etruscans. Now on the way upstairs, you get a chance to look back and you see the Egyptian statues on either side of the doorway. Our next location in the Vatican Museum is a separate museum. It's known as the Museo or the Museum of Gregoriano Etrusco, and it was founded by Pope Gregory XVI in 1837. And this museum within the Vatican Museum has 9 galleries and houses all sorts of important Etruscan pieces from all sorts of Italian excavations. Vases, sarcophagus, bronzes, you name it, it's here. And it's one of the reasons why we came to spend so much time here. It's a treasure trove of waiting to be photographed to be used in my Western Civ classes on the Etruscans. So here we enter the first room and you see all sorts of pottery. This is much older pottery. Then they have a chariot. It's a mock-up, but they have original pieces on it. So this is the front side. Here is the back side. You'll notice with the standing area they have these straps, and that's like a suspension. Incredible gold and silver work. So here is a nice piece of gold belting, gold bracelets, gold necklace with rings, tremendous display of silver. Now silver is hard to find because frequently it's melted down and used for other purposes. Then here we have what an ox cart would have looked like, the move material with the Etruscans, and you see the dark pieces which are actual and they fit them where they're supposed to go. And then we have one of the famous works of art that you see frequently in history books, the wine bottle with the rabbit made as a rabbit skin. Here we have the Gorgon-headed, probably used in a funeral burial. Then we have these bosses. These would sit in the middle of an Etruscan shield with one of their gods on it, one of their god of war, and then they would use that to hit other people. The shield was an offensive weapon as well as a defensive weapon. And then here we have this stunning bronze Etruscan warrior, full suit of armor, and just part of his head misses, the front and the back side. Some Etruscan helmets, kind of bullet shape, Etruscan axe head. This can be an Etruscan dagger, a very early Etruscan dagger. Looks very Mycenaean, actually. And then here we have some of the spear points that were utilized. And then we get a little bit more sophisticated. There's the bronze shield. Now that is probably 2 feet, 2.5 feet wide. And they use greaves. These are bronze leg protectors. And they also had bronze cuirass. And here is one of those. Very hard to get a picture with the glass, the best I could do. It's a front and a back piece, and you would just use leather to tie the two sides. Then we have a couple of sarcophagi. Here we have a gentleman here sleeping, and notice they still have paint on this particular one. And then here we have a rather wealthy individual who evidently enjoyed eating. Some more jewelry. This would have been parts of necklaces. Here's another necklace. Here are other pieces. Look at the headpiece, solid gold. Another necklace with a headpiece on top of it. And then here you have a cindiary. Sometimes the Etruscans didn't put the whole body into a tomb. That was very expensive. So the body would be cremated and be put in a cindiary, which is basically a little miniature sarcophagus with the effigy of the person on top and then something about him on the bottom. And then this is a close-up of one of the silver drinking goblets. And while we're up here, we got a chance to look down below. These are the people that are moving through the rest of the museum heading towards the Sistine Chapel. So after we finished with the Etruscans, it was time for us to join the crowd and move through the museum. But up until this point, we had very few people in the rooms with us. Most of the rooms that we entered, nobody was there except the guards. The Etruscan area was just literally deserted. We didn't see anybody the whole time we were there, and we were there for about an hour. I mean, it looked like I took a lot of pictures. I only showed you a representative sample. I took almost 400 pictures in that part of the museum, much to the concern of my Western Civ students. So now we join the regular crowd. Well, we now join the crowd and start moving towards the Sistine Chapel. So we have this massive hallway, which has, well, there's two forms of art in this particular hallway. One is what you see here. Look at these tapestries. This is Christ risen from the grave. There's a little close-up of it. Dinner, Jesus having a little meal here. What I like is when you get to the bottom of it, you see the animals, including a cat, dealing with the scraps. The other thing is, besides paintings on the walls and tapestries on the wall, look at the ceiling. The ceiling is just art itself. And this is where we have a little problem as Americans. We're not used to having a ceiling that's that intricate. So when we do, the tendency is we become bumper cars. We look up and run into people. And then we get to another section with more tapestries, just unbelievable color. And then we head into a room known as the Salon des Sobieski. And that is the one that has the gigantic painting of the Polish king, Sobieski, leading his troops against the Ottoman forces besieging Vienna and saving them from being taken over. Then we move to the Salon of the Immaculate Conception. So we see various religious artwork. We also end up in the Salon of Constantine. And in that salon, we have the massive wall painting of the Battle of Malvern Bridge, where you have Constantine's forces defeating his enemies to become the Emperor of Rome and ultimately the first Christian Emperor of Rome. The next room that we entered is the one that deals with Raphael, the Raphael Salon. The room is full of all sorts of different paintings and works by Raphael. Of course, Raphael was brought in by Julius II because he was able to kind of copy some of Michelangelo's painting style. And that was kind of insurance in case the Sistine Chapel didn't work out because Julius and Michelangelo were having some issues. But one of the things that he commissioned from Raphael was the School of Athens, which is the gigantic wall painting that he did. This is what you usually see of the Raphael's School of Athens. And here's the close-up of Leonardo, and I believe it's Aristotle. And then, of course, there's Diogenes down below. And we also have Raphael. And Raphael is hiding over here in the corner. And then the next one we're heading to is the Borgia Apartments. Now that's Julius II, and you go in and look at the carved window screens. And looking out this window, one of the things that you see is the Sistine Chapel, something that Michelangelo referred to as far as an architectural style as kind of like a fancy cow barn. And then here we have a couple of paintings that you find in the Borgia Apartments. And then we leave Borgia Apartments and head into the chapel of Pope Urban VIII. And you see the different style of wall coverings. Christ down from the cross. Then there's the ceiling, the chapel, one part of it. There's another section with the various arches, and then the various arches have different themes. It's an incredible view of the ceiling area. Of course, there is the painting of the Annunciation. And then, of course, here's one section with the risen Christ. And then another section which shows the Assumption of Mary into heaven. So this chapel of Pope Urban VIII is quite beautiful to look at. We were very fortunate in that while we were in there, there wasn't anyone. It was not something that a lot of people were interested in, oddly enough. They would go in to see Raphael and they would go in to see other things. But some of the other rooms you would get a little more time. And then once we finished, it's time to head to the Sistine Chapel. Well, now it's time to head into the Sistine Chapel. Now here's an exterior shot of the Sistine Chapel. Now this was built by Pope Sixtus IV, and he hired a man named Giovanni Dolci, who built it in 1475 to 1481. Now when you go in the inside, here's a nice shot of the whole room, which I would like to say was mine. But when you walk through that little door off to the side of the altar, this place was packed with people. They kind of counted them as they came in and left, because during a regular day, anywhere from 20 to 25,000 people come in here. They don't want you to take pictures because that slows everything down. They bump into other people. And literally, you come in that door and the people move you through, and you end up going out through here. Now the room itself is 134 feet long and 44 feet wide, and the height from the floor to the ceiling is 67.9 feet. And then you see the 6 windows. The chapel that the Pope has Mass every day. So when it's in use for religious purposes, no one else is in here. I would recommend that if you want to see the Sistine Chapel properly, pay the money and get a tour guide and go through it in the evening in smaller groups. It probably works a little bit better. Now the floor is decorated with inlaid multicolored marble, and the lower part of the walls actually have tapestries on them. Now Pope Sixtus IV then had artists put paintings along each of the walls there underneath the windows. Now on the left-hand side of the walls are scenes of the life of Moses, and the right-hand wall has scenes of the story of Christ. These were painted by Botticelli, Ghirlandaio, Cosimo Rosselli, Piero de Cosimo, Perugino Petruccio, Bartholomew della Gatta, and Luca Signorelli. Now, the other sections, there are some places where you have niches between the windows, and those have portraits of the Pope. They had something on the ceiling, and there was a little something back behind the altar, and no one really liked that. So it's Julius II who said, I want Michelangelo, I want you to paint something on the Sistine ceiling. And his initial topic, he wasn't wild with. That was something that Julius asked him to do, and he eventually just got fed up with it, destroyed it, and ran off. And then later on came back with this idea to do the ceiling with the book of Genesis depicted on it. And then years later, he'll be asked again by another pope to come in and put a little Last Judgment thing on the wall in the back. He painted the fresco on the ceiling from 1508 to 1512. So it took him 4 years. All alone. He did have people making the plaster. Now here's what it ended up looking like. On the left-hand side, you see this picture of what the ceiling looked like when they began the cleaning process, which was done in the 90s. And on the right-hand side is what it looked like after they finished. Now this was extremely controversial. It had been cleaned in the 1800s, and they used bread and denatured wine. So you have all the soot from the candles and all sorts of other things on it. So when they began to clean it, you had art people saying that they were ruining it. So here's a picture showing the procedure. They used the same holes in the wall that Michelangelo had used to put his scaffolding, and then they gradually moved it from one section to the next, cleaning it with specialized fluids, acid-free paper. There are whole documentaries on this that are just absolutely stunning. And in the end, here's your picture of what it looks like. It's much brighter. You can see it readily from the floor. Now it looks like this is really way up, like you're trying to look at a detail on the ceiling of Notre Dame. And as I said before, it's only 67 feet high, so it's not that high. And when we went through it, as we were being pushed through it, it was really amazing how close you were to the paintings. Now let me show you the process of how they cleaned it. Here's an example. Over the doorways, they have lunettes. The lunettes had never been cleaned. So what you see here in this picture is a lunette with almost 500 years of soot. So they put this special solvent on. Now remember, this is a fresco. Now fresco is painted on wet plaster. So you put the wet plaster on and you paint, and what happens is the way the paint is constructed chemically and the plaster's chemical composition, the paint is absorbed into the plaster. And once that hardens, the only way you can damage it is to break it, to chop a hole in it, knock it off. So you can clean it, you just have to be careful on how you do it. So they had this special cleaner that they put on. Then they would put Japanese rice paper, and then they would put some more solvent, and then gradually, bit by bit, they would begin to peel those pieces off and then continue with the process. So here's what it looked like at a later stage. And you can see just how brighter it is from the other one. And ultimately, when they finished cleaning it, this is what you saw. So you can see a significant difference. As a matter of fact, there were people who were specialists in, the Sistine Chapel's history that literally could rewrite their books because they could see much more detail now than when they were doing it. Now, then we have, of course, Michelangelo's painting of the Last Judgment. Now, that was done in 1535, and that was commissioned by Pope Paul III. It took him a year. And this is what the chapel looked like before they cleaned it. And then here we have an example where you have what I call the dirty version over here on the left side. And this is the cleaned version on the right side. Now, one of the things they ran into when they were cleaning this is that this painting had gone through a period of, shall we say, clothing versions. Everybody was nude originally in Michelangelo's paintings. This was controversial at the time when he painted it, but there's a period where they decided that they would cover up Christ's groin and other people. And they had to decide what to do, because that is actually a moment in art history where you have the censorship of art. So they decided to leave some clothed and remove the rest. Down in the bottom, where you have all these people being pulled down in the hell, there's this boat. And the man in the boat looks like Charon the boatman. This is a close-up view of him. Nice green-eared creature dragging everybody to hell. The face is actually a cardinal who is one of the most vociferous opponents of Michelangelo's paintings because of their nudity. So Michelangelo immortalized him as this demon in hell. And more than 100 years after the death of Michelangelo and the death of the cardinal, his family petitioned the Pope to at least take the ears off, or, don't make it so mean, and the Pope turned him down. So it is well worth seeing, but be aware, if you're going in a regular crowd, you're not going to get to view it like you really would like to. When we exited the Sistine Chapel, we headed back into the museum to go down the other aisle. This is the way you exit out of the Vatican Museum. So again, here's the ceiling of one of the sections of the hallway. And then you're further down, you see this hallway with all these cabinets. And here's a close-up of some of those cabinets. And originally, these all held different types of collectibles that the popes had gathered. And then periodically in the museum, you'll run into one of these, which is one of the gift shops. And then when we reach the end, here we are at the top, and we have to circle our way down to exit. And then once we got down to the lower floor, here was the view back up to the top. And then we exited out through that doorway there. And now we are looking forward to go into St. Peters. Well, that's not going to work out very well. It's 3:30 in the afternoon. We assumed that all that horde of people that had been in that building would have gone home. No, they headed to the St. Peter's Square. So here we are walking out in the St. Peter's Square, where you have that half-moon set of columns running all around. There's the Egyptian obelisk. There's a nice closer view of it. And beautiful picture of St. Peter's Basilica. So what are we going to do? Well, we need to get in line. Well, we assumed the line was down towards the opening to get into the church. It was not. It was initially up halfway of the semicircle of columns on the right-hand side. So this picture I'm showing you is the Vatican apartments. And one of those spots is where the Pope comes out once a month and preaches and blesses the people. But when we first stood there, the line was right where these columns kind of part, right here. Well, we waited a couple of minutes, deciding what to do. And by that time, they had gone all the way around to the other side. So the wait was probably another 3 hours. And the story went that they had several events in St. Peters, and the guards just stopped everybody from going in. So if you wanted to go in and see St. Peters, you had to skip the line with a tour guide, and we opted not to do that. So our day at the Vatican Museum, the Sistine Chapel, and St. Peter's kind of fizzled at the end. My daughter and her husband had been to Rome before, and I've checked and found that they managed to get into St. Peter's, but they didn't get any better pictures of the Sistine Chapel, or any pictures either. So I'm sorry to say that I'm going to have to go back to Rome. Sheri and I are going to have to go back to Rome and correct this situation. Sheri and I hope you enjoyed the tour. Please come by our YouTube channel at Bob Packett, and please subscribe and leave some comments. Thank you very much. I've been doing podcasting on history for over 15 years. I've got over 4,000 shows, and I've done CDs, which of course can be sent out as USBs. So if you would really like to get more on history for free, then come by my website, as you see here, historyaccordingtobob.com, and see what's there. So thank you very much again.